Kommer på litt strategisk tenkende.
Okay, so today we will discuss quantified self and live logging theme, and we have 3 articles about it, and Anders will talk about all 3 papers. Two of them. So before we start, I wanted to those are the articles which we will discuss. Yeah, before we start, I wanted to show you some of the things that are already out there and contributing to that field. So some of you, if Tonya was here, she's also using Fitbit. Any of you using Fitbit? So Fitbit started as a simple step counter device.
Don't steal my material.
What's that?
Don't steal my material.
I haven't seen it. So it's sort of it's a small device. Some of the devices are worn on the so if you go to the product page, it's quite they have a variety of devices. So they have bands. They announced recently a smartwatch as well, Surge. So, but it started as a simple clip-on thing, which basically counts your steps and has pressure sensors to estimate the elevation difference. So if you're climbing stairs, it can kind of say, well, you've climbed a certain altitude. So if you're biking up the hill or cycling or skiing or running up the hill, it kind of knows the elevation change. So some of the bands don't have it, some of the bands have it. They basically track your activity and track your sleep. The watch is similar to the watch I have. I have a Basis one, so that's Basis Peak actually. So that's there was a Kickstarter company which kickstarted them 2 years ago, and then Intel bought them, and that's the latest release from Intel. So they made it a little bit more thin, and it has accelerometer built in, and it has heart rate monitoring based on the light sources and the photoreceptor, which analyzes the changes in your color of your blood, under the skin. So you can have a look. And the Surge has also built-in GPS. So it has a GPS. That one doesn't. So it estimates the distance based on the steps you're taking. So what is all of that? Well, you effectively get into something like a dashboard, and it tells you how many steps you've made. So let's check yesterday. So yesterday, it will kind of show you if it worked. I haven't synced probably. So it shows you, well, you've been active. You were sleeping at night, and then you were sort of going to work, and then you were sitting in the office, and then you were going home, and things like that, right? So it sort of you can see the patterns, and you see how much distance you've done, and it doesn't tell you the exact elevation difference. It sort of estimates the elevation distance by the means of floors, and it sort of analyzes a little bit your sleep. So you can have a look at some of the statistics related to sleeping. It's not super accurate. You can't really use it for medical purposes like what we were discussing yesterday, but it gives you some insights into what you're doing and how active are you. So if I went for a run on Monday evening, so the step counts kind of towards the end of the day are higher than before, and it also actually I went for a run on Sunday. So I clocked 17 kilometers according to the step counter on Sunday. Yeah, so that's the Fitbit. The basis is a bit more accurate, so you can check your calories burnout rate, you can check your skin temperature, and you can also have your perspiration. So it sort of analyzes the skin resistance too. So some people are using those indicators to analyze stress level, for example, or the intensity of your workouts. And same with the other one, you can go back to Monday, and on Monday I was a little bit more active towards the evening. It can in more detail analyze the sleeping patterns, so you can see. I will show you in a minute details of the sleep, and then yeah, is it Sunday? Yeah, so Sunday evening. Yeah, so when I run, the step counts kind of an activity and calorie burnout goes up, things like that. And then if you go to your sleep details, you can see that's yeah, that was yesterday. Yeah, so that's Tuesday. So it sort of analyzes when you were in REM sleep phase, when you were in light sleep, and kind of in deep sleep, and then when you had interactions. Sometimes it makes mistakes. So most of the time, just before I go to sleep, I work on a computer. So on Tuesday, I actually went to sleep around midnight, around probably after that, or maybe here. So sometimes it misqualifies that quiet period of me working in front of the computer where my heart rate goes down as I was asleep, but I wasn't. And also maybe my perspiration kind of goes down or something, I don't know. So for some reason, it sort of usually makes a bit of a mistake early, just before I go to bed. And then once I am in bed, then the rest is quite accurate. And you have some statistics of how long you spend in REM sleep and so on. Those are related to learning and body recovery. So we are running a project with influence of the sleep on your game performance. So whether your gaming skills are improving if you slept well or not. So we have a master student working on that. And we also trying to work out whether the cognitive training for elderly with mild cognitive impairment is influenced by sleeping patterns. So we sort of using that data to see how much of an impact it has on the cognitive skills and the training or sort of cognitive interventions. For me, it's also important how my body recovers. So for example, if you're training, you don't want to overtrain, so you want to have some intense training sessions, but you also need time for your body to recover. So this sort of workout recovery pattern is kind of easier to work out if you're using something like that, because you can, you basically know if you're ready for the next hard workout or if your body hasn't recovered yet, right? So the basic idea is that you should have a cycle. So if this is time and this is your kind of a performance, if you train hard, you will have a dip, right? And then you will have a dip. And then if you train hard again, you will have a dip. And if you train hard again, you will have a dip until you reach a point where you can't train anymore, right? So that's kind of a typical pattern of overtraining. What you want is something like that you've trained, you have a recovery, your recovery should exceed your base level, and then you train again, and then you have a recovery, and then you train again, and then you have a recovery, and you train again, and you have a recovery, and then you're ready for some hard, competition or something. So kind of tracking this cycle, the professional sports people do it, professionally, and if you are just, doing it for hobby, you can sort of do that with those tools for yourself. So you can check where you are in the cycle and whether you're ready for the next workout. Obviously, if you wait too long, the boost kind of drops, right? So you drop back to the baseline performance. So you can't start too early and you can't start too late because you will not benefit from the training. You have to sort of start at the peak before you start dropping to your baseline. Yeah, so they both have nice, so that is the part, the kind of measurement and data display part. They have something which try to gamify your habits, and Basis does it quite well. So they have quite a complex gamification mechanism where you set up yourself goals. And initially you can set the goals for 2 weeks, two days per week only, and you can only set up 3 goals. If you meet them, you get enough points to set up additional goals, right? So you can't just go crazy. You have to start with initially up to 3 goals, 2 times a week, 2 days a week, and that's it. And if you don't meet them, you don't get points and you can't set anything more. But if you meet them, then you have points and you can set up additional goals. And those goals can be anything. They can be, you know, consistent bedtime, that you go to sleep at certain time and you wake up at certain time, or you sleep a certain duration. It can be how many calories you burn. I'm in the run club, so I have to run twice a week. That's the initial goal. And if I meet that, I can, you know, increase it. They have a default goal of wearing the watch. So they try to encourage you to wear the watch. So if you wear the watch 12 hours per day, twice a week, you get points, right? So that's the kind of a default goal which they have. And I have additional one for burning certain amount of calories twice a week for like 2 days in a week. So I still have some calories to go. If I don't run and if I don't do heavy physical exercise, I don't reach that goal. I set it up so that I actually have to go for an hour of running or some workout to burn enough calories to reach that goal. Yeah, by the activity. So they estimate it by the intensity of your movement, right? So if you run, you have a certain pattern of accelerometer data, and they say, oh yeah, you've been running, and based on your weight, that's the kind of estimate. So it is a proxy. It's not an exact calorie expenditure, but it's sort of an estimated amount of calories that you are burning. So they know a person with your age, with that weight, when running with that speed, should burn approximately that many calories, exactly. Yeah, so that's how most of those kind of trackers look like, and that's how most of those trackers work. The heart rate is reasonably accurate. So if
106.
Sorry?
106.
106, that's quite high.
So high.
Yeah.
You're so excited. That's good.
So my kind of resting heart rate average for that day was 62. I measured it today morning, and my resting heart rate was 50 just when I woke up. It's quite low, so it gets better when you train. So with the professional athletes, especially like with the endurance athletes, it can go under 40, so like in mid 30s or even below that. For normal person, if it's under 50, it's considered a high risk of some heart failure. So you should immediately see a doctor. But if you are trained sportsman, that's normal. Yeah, so yeah, that's a running session in the evening, and you can sort of zoom and see more detailed analysis of what exactly your heart and your perspiration and so on was doing. So you can see the heart rate being kind of sometimes in high 40s, 140s, sometimes dropping So it's not, it's not to be used as a medical device, but it is something which, which kind of showcases you some of the things. So what's blue? Perspiration. Yeah. What is interesting is that I usually stop sweating when I start running. So the body sort of adapts to the water management, and it only uses enough to kind of cool you. But when I train, I kind of train also the sweating part, that it doesn't sweat that much. So as you can see, it's sort of drop down. Actually, that's the body temperature, I think. That's the perspiration. So the perspiration actually went up. But yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's sort of, you can see it trails off a little bit. It kind of went up initially, but then it trails off. Yeah, the body temperature, of course, went down. I went from home environment to outdoor with, -10 or whatever it was, and it was just cooling the watch. Yeah, so some things you have to sort of, you can't take it for the face value. You have to think of what actually the data represents and what is happening. So they are getting more and more sophisticated. The trackers, they are much easier to use. The data is more and more reliable. The first V1 watch, which they released, was much more unreliable. But that one is still, you may need to verify. If the watch says you have 106 heart rate, yeah, so it may be okay or it may be mistaken, right? You have to sort of calibrate it and you have to measure it with something else to make sure that it doesn't make mistakes. Usually it sort of reports lower than it should be, I've noticed, right? So hopefully it's not the case for you, but yeah. All right, so that's kind of just a quick peek at some of the technologies, and he will tell us, Anders will tell us more about those various, gadgets and why people use them and for what purpose and what we can do with this technology. Yeah. So we can replug the screen. You. Yeah. Perfect.
That's cool. I haven't seen like this before.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. Like Meyer said, I'm going to talk about the Quantified Self, and the two articles I've chosen is the Data-Driven Life by Gary Wolf and the Quantified Self by Melanie Swan.
Can you grab the table and move yourself back a little bit? Yeah.
Do you have a wide enough lens to fit this guy on the screen?
I think it catches you now. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Perfect.
I can just start here again. This is some examples of Quantified Self apps, such as the Fitbit and the app I use called Full Fitness. Yes. The first article is the Data-Driven Life by Gary Wolf. Gary Wolf, he's usually a writer for Wired magazine. This article is published in the New York Times. His first article in that magazine is a newspaper, not a magazine. Yeah. He usually writes about science and social issues. So yeah, and the article talks that tells stories about different people who logs their life in different ways. For instance, he talked about 3 people at the start. One's trying to drink less coffee, so he starts removing 20 milliliters each week, and then till nothing is left, which is stupid, but okay. You need coffee. Yeah. And then another one wanted to know how much time he actually used on doing his roommate's dishes, because he felt it was a lot of time. So he had an electronic date book, which he bought in Tokyo. So he started to write down everything he did. He logged his life, pretty much everything, what he spent, what he ate, how he slept, and so on, and how much time he used on dishes. So he felt it was like an hour a day. It turned out to be like 20 minutes. So he was quite disappointed, really. And a third fella who made a searchable archive of all his ideas from 1984 or something, yeah. Yeah, and this is 2010 now, so you can search through all his ideas. So that's, yeah, quite cool. And then he goes about talking about the toleration of how we do quantification of ourselves now, numbering things, which allows us to do comparisons and experiments on ourselves. Yeah. And then he says that something like it seemed far-fetched before to have all this data about yourself. It was normal to have it in a journal, at the doctor's medical journal, but not in a spreadsheet. Yeah. And then he goes on talking about that it infiltrated our personal lives and how that we log how we sleep, how our mood, how much sex we're having, food, and yeah. So and then he talks about this page called MedHelp, which yeah, more than 30,000 personal tracking projects. And then he mentions Foursquare. Yeah, with about 1 million users back in 2010. I don't know how many there are. Maybe less now.
Probably less. Yeah, they're folding
Yeah. So
the system.
yeah, and then it talks about how we use numbers to tune up cars and then predict elections. So why can't we use it on ourselves to make our life better? Yeah. So then he talks about the magical cloud in 2010, and how that we, as people like to, began to start sharing information about ourselves because there was information to share. And now millions of us track all the time, tracks information about ourselves all the time, such as weight, money, how much calories you burned or ate. Yeah. And then he talks about a guy named Ken 5, who is one of the pioneers in wearables. He comes from a family of runners, and they wanted to know more about mechanics on their performance before, such as how wide a stride you should have, or how your body changed when you got tired, and how the motion changed. Before they had to go in a lab and run and be filmed and analyzed. So he came up to use the accelerometer from the airbag in the car, which triggers the airbag, and put it in the shoe or something. Yeah, and then it transmitted to wirelessly to a sports watch. Yeah, it didn't really say anything about the pace or the distance, but given just the acceleration of the runner's foot, and then he made some algorithm or formula to calculate this into the data you wanted. So, and then he talks. Then Gary Wolf talks about talks with the founder of Fitbit, who presented a prototype in 2008 and got 8 million in capital 5 weeks later, and then now we see what they're able to do. Yeah, that kind of money. Yeah, and then he talks about Philips came up with something called Direct Life. I haven't heard of it. It's that one there that you put in the little square you put in your pocket. And then a company called Zio or something that made a small headband you put on your head, yeah, for monitoring your sleep. And then the Nike Plus, who had 2,005 million users in 2006. Yes, I don't know, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. Yeah, and then the 5 accelerometers are being used in Adidas and Polar watches now. And they sold this company to Garmin in 2006, and then I don't know what they're using it for. Do Garmin do sports watches?
They do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he continues to sell tracking components such as glucose monitors and weight scales.
Mhm.
And then Wolf talks about a woman who logs her time, distance, and heart rate during cycling. And she got even more curious the more variables she added. She wanted to know more by adding more. She also had trouble sleeping because she had a back injury and had operation or something. And then she learned about something called tryptophan, which is amino acid, which is good because that makes proteins. And then she took that and her insomnia went away, but it also turned out she got more focused and she could concentrate better.
Mm.
So by doing this experiment on herself, she found that she fine-tuned her brain. Yeah, and then he talks about the project where you can predict language development with the children by tracking the numbers of conversation the children has with adults, and then it costs $32 million, and it went away with uncut exception. It didn't work very well. No one wanted to buy it really because we want to know how. Because there was a mother who tried it, and she said her husband's words are worth less than mine. The word not worth, but were less than mine. So the father should talk more to the kid. And And then another person who had a father who was diagnosed with liver cancer. He wanted to stop drinking because he was inspired by his father. So disease to become healthier, I guess. And then he took records of each drink he took, and then it gave him a feeling of self-mastery, he says. And then because he didn't want to lie to the diary, so he was quite strict with how he did it. And then he talks about this woman who wants to stop logging about herself because every day she felt like the devices were talking to her saying, "Oh, you're lazy, you didn't run today," or "You're fat, you put on a pound," or something. "You're stupid, you didn't do your brain training," or something. Yeah. And then at the end he talks about this fellow, Bo Adler, who wore about everything you could wear, such as a blood pressure cuff and pulse oximeter. Is that just a pulse gauge or something? Yeah. Accelerometer and a computer to collect all the data, and something he said, like his girlfriend said something like, "What's up with all this?" And then one day everybody is going to do like this, and you won't even notice. Luckily, it's a bit smaller than the computer and blood pressure cuff and all that. Yeah. And then the next article is the Quantified Self, written by a woman called Melanie Swan, which is published in something called Marianne Liebert Inc. It's a publishing for a company for peer-reviewed articles or something. Yeah. She talks about what she calls it QS, so I'm going to call it QS just to shorten it out, but the Quantified Self, what we can measure, such as weight, mood, and sleep. So they talk about a lot of the same things, but Gary he writes it more in a chronicle way. It's more fun to read, maybe.
It's more like a story.
Yeah, it would fit in a chronicle here in Norway, something like that in a newspaper. And she talks about how you can use all this quantified self data in cooperation with big data, which is the thing here, because quantified self is the number equals 1. You're one person who does it. And then she talks about how it can be extended into group data. So you can gather information from all of this different n equals 1 and turn it into n equals a lot. And she presents some numbers, such as 60% of US adults are tracking their exercise routine, weight, and diet, which that doesn't seem right, does it? if diet, putting pictures on Instagram of their burgers. I don't know. Yeah. And then she mentioned some examples of this Quantified Self project. For instance, a girl who uses her twin sister as the control because she wants to try a vegan diet and see how it influences her glucose levels and insulin levels and see how they change. And then she also mentions the same to wearables such as the Fitbit and the Nike Plus. And then she talks about some interesting challenges of quantified self and big data, which is that there's a lot of data sent from all these kind of different monitors and data streams, because there's the thing you put monitors your heart, which sends about 250 times per second or something, and that generates a lot of data. It said 9 gigabytes per month, I think she said. Yeah. And the next step then is, after you gather all this data, is to analyze it some way. So you have to extract the signal from all the noise, or I don't know, it's some sort of data mining. So you have all this data and looking for patterns and so on. Yeah. And then she talks about some opportunities you have by using this. So you can send out, let's say, you get all this information, so you can send medicine out ahead of time. For instance, if you see, let's say, you have a 2-week window, she says, before heart failure, you can monitor heart failure. So if you see that, oh, here, this guy, we see a pattern here. This pattern we've seen before, 2 weeks later, he's going to have a heart failure. So we send him some medicine or marijuana or something. Yeah. Then she talks about these big data repositories or databases, which can be used for research purposes. And then she, of course, addresses the data privacy, as we talked about before. The contributor should have a right to decide on how and who he wants to share it with. Yep. And then she talks about how quantified self is a new kind of science, because and how big data is used by this thing called Kaggle, or I'm gonna say Kaggle, a data compilation website who has over 60,000 data scientists and they require different people depending on their skills, and then you can find solutions to some big data challenges by some customers. So it's like a mechanical Turkish, maybe Turkish. Yeah. And then she addresses the issue with the QS and how it's scientifically sound. The objections to QS being science is that it's self-research, basically. There's no randomization, no blindness, and you're not objective to self-reported data. But this other guy in Gary's article, he said that he wouldn't lie to the diary, but maybe some other opinion here. Yeah. And then, so something like the placebo effect used in QS studies, how self-trackers can realize the benefit, how they can benefit from using the placebo. And she says that with a source, I didn't read the source, but she uses a source, that when you're receiving placebo and you know it, you're still having a 20% more effective than no treatment. So, yeah. And then she talks about limitations QS tracking. She says it might be easier if everything is automated, but how can you? But a lot of it is already automated. You have a step counter, you don't count the steps yourselves. If you want to put it in a spreadsheet or something, then you can. But if you use the Fitbit, you just synchronize. You don't have to do a lot more than that. Yeah. So yeah. And then she talks about some company or something called Safeway, where, as an example, where the employees are paid if they stay the same or get a lower body weight on an annual basis, which is not very fair, I feel, because there might be some employees that struggle with, let's say, an eating disorder and want to gain weight, so they don't get paid as much because they have to gain weight, or if you're pregnant, yeah. If you want to gain weight because you want to get stronger, for instance, to get bigger, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Maybe
they have exceptions.
Yeah, maybe you come in and measure body fat or something, or yeah. Yeah, and then she talks about how the wristbands and smartwatches are now becoming a standard, if you will, when it comes to aesthetics, rather than the headbands and the it's called waistbands. And then she talks about the qualitative data we can use from this to improve our life, such as happiness and well-being and achieving our goals and reducing stress. And it's leaning towards a trend called lean hardware movement, not hardware movement. Yeah. Scientist humor or something. Yeah. Yeah, and then she talks about using to give you some qualitative feedback instead of just saying, oh, you run 6,000 steps.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 6,000. It's a number. Is it good? Is it bad? Or yeah, which can lead to behavioral change, she says. So, since most humans aren't good at thinking statistically, they like being told a story instead. So, you're very good at running. You ran 10,000 steps. Good job. Yeah. So, and then she talks about this augmented reality glasses called Google glasses, which we call. Yeah, we agree that it's not augmented reality glasses, but yeah. And then she talks about this emotional tags. When you wear your glasses, you can tag an emotion. When you see a pothole in the streets, you can look up the emotional history of a neighborhood, like crime history. So you want to see how happy is the neighborhood I'm moving into. Yeah. And then yeah, she sums up with more AR glasses, like Google glasses, and yeah, that's how we can turn the body to a knowable, calculable, and administrable object. At the end, she also sends an acknowledgement to Gary Wolf, who wrote the first article. So yeah, that's it, really.
Yeah, excellent.
Because do you even learn, bro? Yeah. Because, like you said, an athlete can use this tool to see, oh, why wasn't my performance as good as last time, or see what you ate or how you slept, and so on. So, and then you can look at heart rate and so on in correlation with food intake or performance.
So what are you using? What is the app?
Full Fitness, it's called.
Yeah.
Which you can use to.
And do you track your workouts? Or?
Yeah, you set up your program.
Yep. That's for the gym.
Yep.
Yep.
And then you can log each exercise, how much weight and repetitions and so on, and you can see your progress.
Okay.
This is not Photoshop. Yes, it goes up. So yeah, that's the only thing I use. I know my mom is very keen on using the Fitbit. She uses it all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Excellent. So thank you very much. Those are two different articles. So the first one is it's a magazine, a newspaper article, which is much easier to read, and it sort of just shows a picture, tells a story. It doesn't sort of analyzes anything in a sense. It sort of showcases the social aspects of it. The second one is also a little bit broad. It's sort of an overview of the various technologies and various challenges. What I like with the second one is her sort of perspective on this kind of new type of science, right? So from one hand, we were treating the body as something which is involuntary, something which we don't really have control over, like your heart rate or your breathing rate and things like that. They just happen. But once you start measuring it, you can subconsciously or indirectly start controlling it. So I can control my heart rate by training and getting it lower, right? So I feel I have control over my heart rate, even though I don't control it like a muscle where I can contract or release immediately. I still feel I can shape it. I have some control over it. It's the same about sleep. It's the same about any other habits that you might have or which you kind of physiologically do. So she was saying that a lot of people sort of get into it because it's kind of uncharted territories, like a new frontier where humans get control over, which we didn't have control until now, but now we're getting a control over this, and we feel more empowered and feel more, yeah, maybe indirectly being able to shape it. So that is quite interesting. The other one is, as Anders was saying, the aggregation of data. So of course you have sample of one, and that's not great for doing science, but if you have services like those which aggregate data from multiple people, you get some insights into some patterns. So with the sample of one, do you feel it's a weakness or it's a strength?
What do you mean?
For doing research. So if you want to establish some pattern and you can only do it for one person, is it?
Yeah.
What are the benefits and what are the weaknesses?
Well, it was discussed in here as well that
Yeah.
it might not have to be a valid thing because you don't have to generalize because it's only about you.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why it might not be a problem.
No, exactly. It has some problems, even though it might be a positive thing, right? So if you're doing research just for yourself, on yourself, that's great because you don't really care, for example, what's the average something in population if it doesn't really apply to you, right? It's an average in population, which may or may not apply to you directly, right? So if you know something about yourself, that's great, but there are some challenges, for example, in the way you conduct it, because you can't have double-blinded experiments, right? All your experiments are sort of biased because you don't have this double-blindness. Yeah. So how can you overcome that?